So like the exiles in Jeremiah 29, God calls us to plant gardens that maybe others will harvest. Because preparing the way isn't about our personal success or organizational health or anything like that. It's about creating conditions for others to encounter God. I want to ask you a question that could influence hundreds, if not thousands of lives potentially, and have implications for generations to come. And that question is, what will the next 25 years look like? What will the next 25 years look like? So much can change. What will you do over the next 25 years? What will you invest in? What will you spend your time, your energy, or your money on? Where will you be in 2050? Will you be around at all? See, Moses prayed in Psalm 90, verse 12. He said, "Teach us to number our days so that we can have a wise heart." I love that. We need to do more of that. Teach us to number our days so that we can have a wise heart. You know, are you aware of the passing of time? And that what you do now will influence tomorrow? And you know, if we follow the trajectory of your life, the pace at which you are learning and growing and changing or not changing, if we just took the current trajectory of your life and then fast forward to 25 years, where would you end up? Would you like who you are? Would you be like, yeah, that's 25 years from now, I'm on pace to be everything I'm meant to be? Or if we did that, would you realize, oh, I'm not going at the right pace. I think I'm being a little, not purposeful enough, or I'm just too lazy, or whatever it is. Will you have the relationships that you want if we look at how well you're investing in those relationships right now? Will you have the wisdom and spiritual maturity that you dream of for 25 years from now if we just keep the current pace that you're on right now? And let me edit the question a little bit. What will the church of 2050 look like if we continue the current trajectory that we're on? Whether we're talking about this church, Lake Tapps Christian Church, or just the American church or the worldwide church, what will it look like if we think about the leadership development, the commitment to God that the people of God have? Like, what will the world look like if the church continues at its current trajectory? For us here in our local church, in 2050, Lake Tapps Christian Church will be 66 years old. Most of today's leaders will have passed the baton on to the next generation in 25 years. I will be 60 years old in 2050. So good chance I won't be your lead pastor in 2050. The babies in the nursery right now, or if you're holding the babies right there, they will be the young families of 2050. They're going to have their own babies. The kids in our kids ministry right now upstairs will be the pastors and the elders and the ministry leaders of this church. Because, so I'm 35 years old, so the 10-year-olds upstairs, 25 years from now, will be me, my age right now. It's crazy to think about. Today's teenagers, they're going to have teenagers of their own, getting some of their own medicine. So what kind of church will the next generation inherit from us? What will the church of 2050 look like? That's what I've been thinking about recently. Because we so often think in the short term, what's our 2-year plan? What's our 3-year plan? Maybe 5-year plan, or just, we like to invest, whether it's personally or if you just look at how businesses operate, we like to invest in things where we will personally see the outcome and we get to experience the benefit of whatever we invest in. So we think very short term. But God is calling us to think differently. His plans often unfold across generations, requiring faith and obedience for today in order to prepare for blessings tomorrow. So we need to think generationally, not just short term. One of the best known scriptures that many of us have heard, Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper." We've all seen that, bumper stickers quoted everywhere. But though we know, we may not understand the context that that's written in. And so I want to share with you where that comes from. That Jeremiah 29, chapter 29, it's a message that God is giving to the people of Israel right before Babylon comes and invades Israel, takes over Israel, and then brings the people into exile. So they invade, they take people from their homes into a foreign land. That's what the exile was for the Israelites. So God is speaking to them right before this happens. And so it's a terrible, like none of us would want to experience that. It's a terrible thing to be ripped from your homes. So what does God tell them to do while they're in exile? He's preparing them here in Jeremiah 29. So in Jeremiah 29, starting at verse 5, God is saying, build houses and settle down in the foreign land. He's saying, in the foreign land, when you're in exile, build houses and settle down. Cultivate gardens and eat what they produce. Get married and have children, and then help your sons find wives and your daughters find husbands, in order that they too may have children. Increase in number there so that you don't dwindle away. And then verse 7, promote the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because your future depends on its welfare. So kind of to paraphrase what the message that God is giving them, he's saying, you're in a foreign land, but don't live like it's temporary. Think long term. Build, plant, invest for your children, for your grandchildren. So God is telling them to take a generational mindset. Even though being in exile was a temporary situation, God is saying, think generationally. And this is the kind of generational thinking that God is calling us to live today. That we too are like exiles, that we know one day Jesus will come back, heaven and earth will be remade. So this is not our permanent home the way we know it and see it. And yet, God is calling us to think generationally, to invest in where we live and what the world we live in here. It's not just about us. It's about building a foundation for those who come after us as well. There's this idea or this theme in Scripture about preparing the way of the Lord. Isaiah prophesied about it. We read about it during the Advent season. And John the Baptist calls people to prepare the way for the Lord. And as we wait for Jesus to return, we are called to be a people that prepare the way as well. On top of that, in Matthew chapter 28, the last thing Jesus says before he ascends into heaven is, he says, go and make disciples of all nations. And so this doesn't just mean evangelism, preparing the way, making disciples. That doesn't just mean evangelism, though that is definitely a huge part of it. But to prepare the way, to be the church, encompasses the broader idea of creating conditions for people and communities to thrive under God's rule and reign. Think about that. What does it mean to prepare the way for God, to be the church? It means to create conditions for people and communities to thrive under God's reign. Which means this applies to whoever you are, no matter what industry you work in. Whether you're an electrician or a teacher or a stay-at-home mom or whatever you are, you can create conditions for people and communities to thrive under God's reign. Like John the Baptist, who pointed towards Christ's coming, our work is not necessarily about personal accomplishment, but it's about paving the way for God to work through others in the future. So what are we building today that will bless generations to come? Even if we never get to see the final results of it, what are we investing in as individuals or as a community? Think about the people who invested in your faith. How did you get where you are right now? Is it because people invested in you in one way or another? Who planted the seeds that led you to know Jesus? Parents, pastors, mentors, friends. You are the fruit of their faithfulness. It's a beautiful thing to think about. When I think of my own life, I think of my youth pastor, Robert Brown, who spent so much time with me. Even if he's just running errands or something, he said, hey, do you just want to ride around in the car with me? And so I would spend a lot of time with him, just seeing him live life, and he would talk about his relationship with God. I think in college, I went to Kansas State University, a public university, and the thing was you'd kind of start in the dorms, and you live in the dorms, and once you had a friend group or something, then you'd move off campus into a house, and that's where it's really fun because you're living in a house, there's less rules with the dorms and stuff. But I think of Austin, who was a senior, pre-med. He was going places. He's a doctor now. He's pre-med. And all his friends moved off campus to a house. But he intentionally chose and said, no, I'm going to stay in the dorms as a senior, and I'm going to look for a bunch of freshman guys to mentor. And so he gathered me and a handful of other guys. And he poured his life into us and led Bible studies with us and taught us leadership skills and all sorts of things. But, he's a senior. Like, that's your last year in college. You can have a lot of fun with your friends. And he's like, no, I'm going to give all that up to live with a bunch of lame freshman guys. Like, that was a sacrifice. He invested in me and a couple other guys. If you think about this church, this land had to be bought and money was given and the building was built. People sacrificed so that we could be sitting here right now. In order to be able to pay for land and build the building, the original elders of this church had to put their own personal names on the mortgage, meaning if the church defaulted, they would lose their houses. That's a big liability. They did that for us. They don't even know us. They're not even on this earth anymore, some of them. They invested in the next generation. So I want to ask you, what seeds are you planting? Now, there's no bait and switch. There's no special offering. I'm not asking for money today. There's no capital campaign coming, all right? So there's nothing coming. There's no shoe that's going to drop. But I'm asking you, what seeds are you planting? Who are you investing in? Maybe who are you mentoring? What legacy are you going to leave? Are you organizing your life around the way of Jesus? Or are you just kind of just living through and then you're starting to look back and be like, I wasn't prepared. Why didn't I do more in the past? Peter Stroppel, just a business consultant, once said that legacy is not leaving something for people, it's leaving something in people, which I like that a lot because it demands that relational aspect. So like the exiles in Jeremiah 29, God calls us to plant gardens that maybe others will harvest. This means raising up leaders, creating a culture of belonging, and building ministries that will thrive long after we're gone. Investing our time and even our money maybe in people and things that we may never see the results of. Because preparing the way isn't about our personal success or organizational health or anything like that. It's about creating conditions for others to encounter God. Just as others have invested in us and for us, we're called to do the same for the next generation, for the church of 2050.